Hi and welcome to Thete Gaming, another Ret video, but for pre-patch this time. I'm just going to go over a few little bits and pieces. Obviously our add-ons are a bit broken at the moment. How many are broken depends on which ones you use. I'll discuss a couple of little workarounds I've come up with, but it may well be that by the time you're watching this, it had been fixed anyway. The main new addition people will have noticed, of course, core edition will be the battle res. How are we enjoying that? Having a nice little battle res there. I still need to bind that in Click. It's like being on a death knight, I suppose. You know, on my death knight where you've got, oh, I've got the option of battle resin someone if they fall. That's nice. But because I only really do LFR, it'll be like, yeah, I probably won't do that. Because at the end of the day, they die to standing in fire. Except on a paladin, it's different. Because there's no value in me doing it on my death knight. I'm just wasting runic power. On my paladin, I could be thinking, they died to standing in fire. They gave me wings. Nice. I'll res them again. They might stand in fire and give me more wings. Only kidding. Don't res those. Save it for the healers and the tanks. But nice to have. Nice to have. Add-on wise, a little bit tricky. Hakili, poor bugger, must be knackered. I've noticed a lot of updates. It wasn't working at all for Ret for 10.0. Now there is a version, but there are still a few little issues with it. I'll show you one quite quickly if I just get myself to 5 holy power. I've covered it up, but I've messed that up now. But at 5 holy power, it doesn't tell me to. I've got to I'm out of combat. I'm out of combat now. This is my workaround. I forgot I'd put it in the way. At 5 holy power, it doesn't tell me to use what you might call Templar's Verdicts, but it's really final verdict down here. And there's a reason for that. If I move over here, 5 holy power, if I go over here, it will tell me to use Divine Storm. But it will not tell me to use Templar's Verdict. And that's because I actually don't have Templar's Verdict. I've got Final Verdict, not Fire a Talent. I haven't got it Fire the Talent because we've got the Legendary. So I'm using the Final Verdict Legendary here. And the reason is, if I go into Hakili, I might show you a couple of other things in here for those who use it but don't really set it up. Actually, while I'm actually on this, because this is what I have been setting up, just to remind you, if you've got things you don't want in the rotation, it's quite easy to adapt them. So, for example, my Gavel the Final Arbiter, that's just a DPS cooldown. I track that using Tell Me When, so I have it disabled. Sometimes I just have it for boss encounters only. Sometimes I just disable it altogether, as I've got here. Scars of Fraternal Strife. It is actually quite useful just to have that boss encounter only, because then it reminds you not to consume your final one, unless, you know, you've got some good reason for doing that. But in terms of abilities, so Templar's Verdicts here, that's okay when it comes up. There we go. So we've got Templar's Verdicts, not a problem. What we don't have is Final Verdict. I've got Final Reckoning, but there's no Final Verdict. To which you look at it and you go, so that's why. So what I did, because I also, and I have done for many years, used a combination of Hakili and Tell Me When. So at the moment, I haven't actually set up my UI for Dragonflight properly. I'll be doing that over the next couple of weeks. Maybe I'll do some videos on what I've decided to go with there. But I just created an extra one specifically for Final Verdict, and I just stick it over there so that when I've got, so that I don't overcap holy power. When I've got 5 holy power, I use that. And all I did for it, in Tell Me When, for those who use it, is I created a condition icon with the texture for Final Verdict, same as Templar's Verdict. And the conditions I created, 5 holy power and unit in combat. I always have unit in combat. I don't need to be bothered with Tell Me when I'm out of combat, really. So that was my little workaround for that. It's still not ideal. I still need to carry on setting things up. Because Hakili is still not quite there for Dragonflight for the Ret Paladins, I don't know how it's working for other specs. For example, it's not telling me to use Exorcism. In fact, if I have a little look in here, is Exorcism even in? I hadn't actually checked that yet. I noticed it wasn't working. It is in. But it's not getting me to use. Even when I have a second downtime, I notice it's not urging me to use Exorcism, which is a bit weird because it does quite a lot of damage. So it's worth using. It is worth using. For single target, it's worth having. It's worth using. So that's a weird one. So I'll create myself a Tell Me When to Tell Me When Exorcism is up as well. But just to sort of show how this is working. So when I've got 5 Holy Power, that comes up, I just go bang, done that. It's a reasonable workaround. Other things to bear in mind as well. So you can see down here I've got a Blessing of the Dawn tracker, because now what you want to do is part of your starting rotation, rather than going straight in and Gavel and Final Reckoning, which is what I've got, and all the rest of it for hitting, well, Crusade first, I suppose, and Final Reckoning, is just make sure you've got Blessing of the Dawn active, because that's a nice DPS boost. I mean, remember, it doesn't give you it in the starter build, mad. You get to 5 Holy Power, you get Dawn, so the standard one will give you damage increase by 10%, 15 seconds, and you'll keep it up, you will keep it up. And Seal of Order, Holy Power spending abilities deal additional 10% increased damage, so that's always useful as well. So that's a nice little boost. And for those who think, I have seen the odd question about, the Justicar's Vengeance. It's still doing a ridiculous amount of damage, of course, but bearing in mind, because we've got other things that buff our Final Verdict and so on, it should actually, we still do use Final Verdict. There's Conduits and your Legendary, and there are also like abilities like Righteous Verdicts that buff your Final and Templar's Verdicts as well. So it's not like that we use our Justicar's Vengeance as a normal ability. That being said, if you need some healing, you absolutely use it. It's really useful now. So all I've done is I've bound. Normally I have, this is my Altenair 4, I normally have Word of Glory on that. So what I've done now is just use Justicar's Vengeance for that. And if I needed to use Word of Glory, which is more likely on another player, then I just use Clique to bind that to the same button. I just bind it to 4, and as long as I'm hovering over a player or a player's unit frame, it'll still use Word of Glory. I don't actually need it on my bars there at all, but it is still accessible. So yeah, I mean that's where we are at the moment. I'm just waiting for cooldown for add-ons to start working. At some point, I'll probably try and find someone to make a weak aura. Someone will do it at some point to track. Where is it now? Inner Grace every 12 seconds, gain a Holy Power again, just to try and avoid overcapping on that. But that's it where we are. I think I did talk about the starter build before, but I'll go back to it just to add in some more thoughts to it. I am heartened to see. Well, I say I'm heartened because I like the idea of the starter build. The fact is, when you logged in and Blizzard just said, look, we've now, some players won't have actually played the game when we had all these talent trees before. You've only known like the 5 or 6 talents you had from Mr. Pandaria days. Some of you have never played before then. So we'll just give you the starter build. If you want to change it, that's up to you. And that's great. That's absolutely fantastic. And the starter build you wouldn't expect to be the most competitive guild. The idea of a starter build is that it's the most straightforward to play. And the way Blizzard used to do that with the old talent system is the talent, you would notice the talents down the left-hand side were the passive ones. Passive are obviously easy to play with. It's not giving you new abilities. So you're using your core abilities, learn your core abilities, then you start to have the others. The problem with it is it misses some things out. First of all, going for the Sanctified Wrath here when there's no reason for it. Of Dusk and Dawn and Seal of Order are passive abilities. And even, I know there can be a danger for a new player. They use their spenders every time they get 3 Holy Power. But it is surely one of the first things to learn if you're going to want to play properly, that no, you use builders only when either there's no spenders available. You use spenders only when there's no builders available, get it right, or when you are capped on Holy Power. So there's absolutely no reason why a newish player shouldn't be using of Dusk and Dawn and Seal of Order. Similarly, they've gone for these things. I can Hand of Hindrance. I mean, I suppose they're building it for PvP as well, although I don't actually. I mean, you have PvP abilities, don't you? But why that? You don't need that, and you're missing out on like useful things. Ashes to Ashes is useful. There's useful things down here. I mean, and the capstone. What execution sentence? Why? If they wanted to give you, obviously you don't go for this, but if they wanted to give you something passive, these are passive. If it's straightforward, may not be the best option at the moment, but they're passive. And if you're a new player, you probably haven't got your legendary. You know, it is like they're thinking to themselves, well, they might have their legendary. If they've got their legendary, they've played enough to know how to use Final Reckoning, to give them Final Reckoning. They've not given Exorcism at all. They've given you this Righteous Verdict, which, you know, you have to play properly to use Righteous Verdict properly. You have to be a bit mindful of it. It only gives you 6 seconds. So it's a very weird cluster of talents. So I'm much preferring this one, which, as I say, is very, very, very close to this standard that's suggested on the guides that you'll see for Dragonflight. As I say, the only one you probably wouldn't see there is Justicar's Vengeance. But yeah, that's because I will be playing with many, many idiots. And when I do dare to do a bit of LFR, which I might do this weekend, just to try it out. I don't need anything on my Paladin. He's plenty well geared enough for Dragonflight leveling. Plenty well geared. But just to try a few things out. And yes. So let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know what any questions you may have. As I say, in the next couple of weeks, I'll probably put together what I would do add-on wise when it's working, and which tell me whens I think are going to be useful. The trick with tell me when, of course, is you want the information you need. You don't want to be staring down at all these. In fact, I'm likely to move these out of the way at some point. You don't want to be you want, you know, just to stare at one little part which isn't too far off the boss, but also doesn't obscure where the boss and your targets are. But at the same time, you do need all the relevant information. So I'll be having a work on that. But I would strongly recommend people track whatever you use. Tell me when, week, course, whatever. Strongly urge that you track Blessing of Dawn, because that's going to be quite crucial now. And some way of paying very careful attention to your holy power, because at the moment Hercule does not realise that we have Final Verdict, and it's not quite getting Exorcism in there as well. But those are my initial thoughts in terms of how it's going on live. I can't criticise too much the game. I know there's been a bit of issue with stutter, you know, graphical issues, and I think we sort of knew it wasn't going perfectly. But most of the issues I've had so far are with add-ons, which has got nothing to do with Blizzard, of course. But let me know your issues or thoughts down below, and until next time, I'll see you later.